Hi there. First of all, welcome from wherever you are. And based on the participant list, we've got people from all over the globe. So for those of you who are waking up early or staying up late, thank you. And the rest of you, welcome as well. But first of all, my name is Dave Zwang. I'm the chairman of the Ghent Work Group. And with me is Christian Blaise, who is the marketing director for the Ghent Work Group. And this is really all about kind of the genesis of what we at the Ghent Work Group did, how we got there, and how we can help you do better at what you do and get more reliable processing for you and for your clients, so you can meet their expectations. So I just want to start by giving you a little background about the Ghent Work Group. First of all, we're now, I think, over 22 years old, which is, boy, does time fly. We originally were founded kind of as a graphic arts think tank. We wanted to, the goal was to bring intelligence to workflow. The reality is that it started because there were a number of countries in Europe that kind of within their own countries and then cross country had problems when they went to exchange files, because a company would say, hey, listen, I want to send you a file. And the printer would say, well, this is how I need my file. So, publishers and consumer product companies and whoever was trying to print something really didn't know how to prepare the file unless they called up the printer and said, "And how do you want it?" And they were all different. So this was really a way of aligning a lot of that, and that's how it started. And it was, but as it evolved, and as we started to get more international, and we developed, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, how we develop standards, et cetera. It was really about bringing intelligence to workflow. Workflow is not just passing a file. It's how can we pass a file that's good with information that makes sense, that can help drive the process and inform the people. Again, ultimate goal, how do you meet their expectations, right? So we started by unifying, standardizing creation of PDF and pre-flight settings, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that. But this is really primarily about how do you test your workflow, and we'll get to that as well. But the other thing that we did, and it kind of evolved as time went on even further, and that's how do we find better ways to process and exchange files and instructions. And so it's not just a matter of passing a good PDF file. How do I pass the PDF file with all of the instructions that are necessary to process it? So at the GWG, we created a bunch of different kinds of tools. We created the specifications, and I'll talk to you about what that means. And we dealt with application settings. So, for example, if you go to the gwg.org website, which, by the way, if you haven't been to, you should. There's a lot on there. I'm going to let you know right up front, but it's our admin has been and Christian, the marketing, have been trying to make it a little bit easier to navigate. The specifications are on there. That's the PDF specifications. Application settings. So, for example, what are the right settings I should be using for InDesign or Quark Express or other types of applications? As a matter of fact, when I say other types of applications, we've even gone and done testing and settings for the kind of the office-based applications, the web applications. But as we were doing all this, we found that great. So we're creating these specifications, we're giving people the right way to produce it. It gets to the printer and it's still not working. What's going on? And that's really where we started talking about. We got involved in test suites, and as I said, I'll talk to you about that and show you some of that in a second. And the other thing we did was in line with the connected workflows of today, right? And we were very prescient about it when we started putting it together. We knew we were going to have these. It's not just a matter of throwing a PDF over the wall. How do I get all of the information that's required? It's, how do you include a job ticket? We started with things like ad tickets. So if you're a magazine, you're putting a matter of fact, it was the first one we did. You wanted to put an ad in a newspaper or a magazine. What's the standard for a job ticket. And we went through a lot of that, and that was the beginning. And we got to some other things as well. But let's talk first about that kind of the core where we started, which was the kind of the PDF, what we call PDF X Plus. You know, if you think about PDF, PDF's an amazing standard. You know, it was a format developed by Adobe. It's now a standard, an international standard. And it's designed to communicate information. The problem is it can communicate a lot of information, like, you know, videos, movies, sounds, etc. And obviously you can't print a sound or print a movie. So how do you then get more reliability in terms of that PDF file that you want to send across? And the way to do it is you have to actually restrict. You have to put limitations in. And we did it based on applications. So for example, we had sheet fed offset, digital print, sign and display, packaging. We're now looking at and starting to work with textiles. And these are the kinds of things we do just to make it so that your work is going to be more standardized. Another thing we did, and this was really an offshoot of the job tickets I talked about before, which was how do you communicate information that's kind of part of the, not necessarily part of the file, but it is necessary to have it processed. You know, for example, things like cutting, creasing, bleed, etc. You know, everybody, oh, well, if it's red, it's a die cut. If it's blue, it's this. And of course, nobody, you know, nobody necessarily knew that those were the rules or they were rules. And then you throw in different languages and cutting is something else in a different language and varnish, etc. So we started working with processing steps. And again, to communicate process information beyond just the content itself, beyond the images, beyond the imagery, and do it in a standardized way so that no matter where it is, it can be done automatically. And processing steps is what it's called, is what is now called. It actually, kind of the first version of it is already an ISO standard. It's already implemented in a number of workflow systems from ESCO, Hybrid, and others. Actually, some of it's even to a degree involved in or implemented in some of the Adobe apps, but it's kind of questionable. So here we have this information, and we're going to continue that. As a matter of fact, we're just, for those of you who are kind of staying on top of things, we are now going to be adding to this information around embellishment. And that's a new work effort. But anyway, getting back to, is your workflow working? So which is the correct one? Now you would automatically say, well, you know, it's got to be the one on the right. But the reality is it's the one on the left. And that's because the way the file was created, which was correct, was fine, but it wasn't processed to be able to support that. So that's the good one. That's the bad one. Now that obviously this isn't this was a
questionable.
example. Christian, what were we going to say?
I was just saying it's questionable that the good one is on the left.
Yeah, but so
technically
we
speaking,
created this file specifically, and it's a legitimate file. But you know, it had a like a transparent overlay on it, but it didn't get processed that way, which is why it came out the way you see it on the right. So how do you know in advance? You don't want to find this out when it hits the press or when you deliver it to the customer. You want to know in advance that the settings in your DFE, in your RIP, in your workflow are going to be correct. So the only way, and we found this, as I said, we found this as we were going through and testing all of these specifications we were making. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about, you know, the Ghent Output Suite. We found that even as we were testing, even things that you would just assume. So here's the Ghent Output Suite. And again, we'll go through a lot of the patches and talk through some of them. But if you look on the left, you see, okay, so this is how this suite looks in Acrobat X or in Acrobat. And that's how it looks in the Apple Viewer. And wherever you see an X on one of those little patches, that's wrong. So you can already see that there are certain features and functions in PDF that can't even be produced or visually represented in certain viewing and in certain applications. And that's a problem. But how do you know in advance that that's the case? Again, how do you know which one's right? We did some testing. This is a little bit old, but it's not that different, and we could run it again today, and I'm sure we'd find the same thing. And with all the little tests that we've done, and you'll see them, and they're available for you to use as well. Red is bad, green is good. So you can see that the Acrobat stuff, the Acrobat applications on the left-hand side of this tool chart here, were all green. That means they passed all of the different tests. And as you look through some of the other ones, you can see that, oh, there's a lot of red. Well, that's because a lot of what was produced that in the file or represented in the file couldn't be visually or actually even interpreted properly for print. So we decided we need to create a test, a way to look at this in a standardized way. And we kind of pulled it apart, and there were some tests that were already out in the kind of in the market, if you will. Global Graphics had something called Kensington Suite, which looked at workflow, and we're kind of ripping specifically because they were Global Graphics was making rips at the time. And then there were some that just did file level checks, and some which, like for example, the pre-flight that exists in InDesign, which by the way is minimal at best, and you should be very alert, be very careful with that one. And then there was the Altona suite, which really was primarily focused on color, but had some file and object testing as well, but minimal. And then what we did, which was ripping, content proofing, etc. We tried to make it as complete as we could. This is what the global graphics test looked like. And you can see, and we looked at it and we said, if we're going to make a test, we want to make it in such a way so that it's not difficult to interpret. So, what's good, what's bad. So we used their basic formula and said, if there's an X, it's bad. Now, in some cases, as you'll see as we go through the specific tests, we couldn't always put an X in it, but we made it very simple and easy for you to be able to interpret, because that's the key to it, right? You want to know what's good, you want to know what's bad. So, kind of in short, before we get into the tests themselves, it's an easy way to test your output device or your entire production workflow. You can actually bring the patches into a workflow, into a creation tool, because we did that actually early on. We were bringing them in, and we were able to report back to the software developers, whether it was Adobe, Quark, etc., that, hey guys, you're not processing this information through properly. So you can test all sorts of things with it. We tried to make it relatively easy, as I said, and complete. It ensures that that the workflow correctly handles transparency, overprint, etc. All of the functions and features within PDF, or PDFX, I should say. And we even created some ICC-based patches for specific output workflows within PDFX4. So, Christian, I'm going to let you pick it up from here, buddy.
Yeah. Just sorry to interrupt. I was just about to say on the previous slide that we have two levels actually on the Ghent PDF Output Suite, because this has evolved over the time. This is the fifth version, and originally was based on CMYK, device sense, spot colors, etc. And then we introduced the ICC afterwards. So that's why on the charts that we have, when we have the aggregated ones, that we have 6 pages, and the first 4 pages are the level 1, which is like the basic that everyone should actually be compliant to. And then we have the 2 extras on the ICC, which is specifically like ICC managed workflows around PDFX4. And that's the level 2 of the conference. In terms of the patches themselves, so we have like these aggregated charts, like the ones that you've seen in a previous slide, where you had the comparison between Acrobat and Apple Preview. These aggregated charts are made of single patches. So every single patch is actually taking care of one specific feature that we want to test or highlight problems when they are. And they have a specific structure that is described here on that slide, where you have on top that's the number of the patch and what it is about. So you have those information on the top, and then at the bottom you have the information that you have the copyright, and on the new patches you will also see a small rectangle, a red rectangle where you have PDFX4 when this patch is really related to PDFX4, and then you have obviously dates and versions. So that's easy to know exactly where you are, specifically if you using the Ghent PDF output suite for quite some time and you have an older version. And by the way, you should upgrade and download the new version, which is completely free, and you can download that from the website and then use the new versions. And here we're going to cover some of the patches that we have on the version 5, which is the latest that we have. So let's go through some patches. That's one of the most basic that we had, which is a complete CMYK patch. This is the 1.0, so that's the very first patch that we designed. And as you can see here on that slide, it's very easy to understand if it's good or bad. I mean, you don't need to have any technical skills to understand that. Fixing the issue might be sometimes more tricky because you need to understand exactly why it's bad. And by the way, on the README of the patches, you have the explanation of all the patches, what they do, and you will also get some hints on where it's coming from, so that is really giving some ideas on where to find the issue. But here on that example here, it's that patch has been specifically designed to highlight the problems that can arise when you have rendering of CMYK objects that are set to overprint to other CMYK objects. So the way the patch has been designed, if the overprint is correctly honored by the application workflow rig that you're using, then you should get what is on top. If the overprint is not honored, then obviously the cross, there is a red cross that is on top of the gray background, for example, on the two first. If the overprint is not honored, then you'll see that cross. And this is how you can see that your software doesn't, or hardware doesn't honor all of the specification of the PDF spec, or you have a bad setting of your device or software.
Absolutely. And Christian, one of the things, just, you mentioned that it sometimes it is difficult when we start looking at an individual patch to try to determine, okay, so now where did this problem occur? Was it in the creation software? Was it in the creation of the, in other words, was it in the creation of the PDF itself, with the settings, etc.? Or did it happen at the DFE? And that's the key to why these tests are great, to be able to work through those. I can tell you that, and it's not a plug, but Fiery actually now has, as a part of their software, actually has like a button or a setup thing that says, get work group approved or something like that. I haven't seen it
Yeah,
recently,
yeah,
but
some vendors have
but
that
that's
because
that's basically what it is, and it was done specifically to help people eliminate that as a variable in terms of how it is. I can tell you from experience, I'm sure Christian's seen it as well. I would go into a plant, into a printing plant where they had just delivered a digital press or an inkjet press, and they had a default DFE setup. The guys in there, ran through, says, "See, everything's working," and left. And those settings were not good settings, but those were the default settings. When we found them, and that's the other reason we did these testings, we were able to go back to those vendors and say, "Hey, look, guys, you don't want to put these machines out there with these settings because they're not good." And that, so increasingly they said, "Oh, you're right." And interestingly enough, many, if not most of the hardware manufacturers, DFA manufacturers, now use this suite of tests as kind of like a last push to make sure that they're doing everything right as well.
absolutely. Um, so that second patch that we have here is actually kind of the same than the one that we had before. The one that we had before was CMYK only. And here it's actually when you have the rendering of a spot color object, which is actually here using the spot color GWG green for some reason, and then that is overprint on top of CMYK object. So same things than on the previous patch. If the overprint is correctly honored, then you will get what is on top, which is what you should get. And if you have here, you have all of the patches that are wrong, but it can also happen that some of them are wrong and some of them are correct, depending on the patches that we're checking. If you have something like what you have at the bottom, that means that you have to do some adjustments on the settings or the workflow that you have.
Then this one is for gray overprint. Again, each of these things looks at a different case that you would see in your in the normal work that came through. As a matter of fact, a lot of these patches were designed and created based on feedback we got from users in the field who said, "Hey, listen, we're seeing a lot of problems with gray overprint. So how can we create a test to do this?" Each one of them was actually then put together to solve or to identify specific problems. And you can see again here, 50% separation black over CMYK or 50% gray over CMYK, 50% black over CMYK. Each of these is a specific case, which is why down below you can see that in some cases it was fine. In other cases, it was wrong, as Christian was saying, with overprint mode 0 or overprint mode 1. And each of those are selections that can be made in the creation tool and or and how it's handled in the RIP. And by the way, another way to actually adjust and fix some of these, and we didn't really talk about it at the beginning, but all of those specifications that we had created, and the reason we started was really, if you're using tools like Pit Stop or using tools like Callus, those specification tools set up those applications to be able to identify if there's a problem, and in most cases, even fix if there's a problem. So it's not only that these things are here and exist, but if you can fix them, that's a good thing too.
And that's the last one of the family, that one, which is the white overprint. So again, same things that we want to identify. Something that you said before, Dave, I think was also very important is like those patches have been designed in a way that we know that they are technically good. So that means that also when you're taking your RIP, you're sure that the file is correct because as you said, it could be that the file that has been generated as a PDF, the PDF is, I would say, mostly correct, but the way it has been generated was wrong, and then the result is wrong. Here, you're sure when you use those patches that what you put in your RIP, DFE, or any kind of workflow that you want to test, you're sure that they have been properly designed. And I think this is also an important part of the suite.
It absolutely is. Fonts are still, as our buddy Dove would say, font is a four-letter word. Fonts
Yeah.
are still one of the bigger issues, strangely enough, that printers come across. We had to develop a test that would show that there is no font substitution for certain types of fonts. And that's really what this was about. And again, if it's a check mark, it's good. In this case, we didn't have an X. We didn't need an X because we show in comparison, and you'll see it on the bigger sheets. If you see a check mark, in this case, it's good. If you're seeing something else, it's definitely bad. And in this case, you can see that that one is bad. Shadings and blends and things like that are probably, they're wonderful from a design standpoint, but from a creation and a PDF standpoint, are probably some of the more difficult things to process.
So on those ones, these are some of the patches where you cannot always show like a check mark or an X. On this one, specifically for A and D, you could have an X, but for B and C, you will just have a shading that is different. So on those patches, what we did is we rendered correctly the different vector elements, because what is on the left side of each group is a vector, and then we just made an image. So there's a reference, which means that if you have something that is different from left to right, that means that it's going to be bad. So here, that was, as you said, the handling of those, sometimes funky shading that are so cool to do and so difficult to print, which is the same that we have on the next slides. It's just different shadings.
Right.
And here again, you have different types of shading, that are using radial mode, for example, or having like top to bottom, one color to another one, same color, etc. And again, if you get something on the left that is different than what is on the right, that means that you have a problem that you need to fix.
Absolutely. And one of the things I can also say, and this is one of the things we found as we were putting this together, if you're looking at some of the dates in the lower left-hand corner, these tests have been going on. We haven't made any recently because nothing has changed that significantly that we needed to, although there are some, we're making a list of things we need to handle. But in some cases, and not as much as we used to see it, but in some cases, you're dealing with a RIP that's just too old and hasn't been updated. And if your RIP is more than 5 years old, you should probably look to see if you can get it updated, because the chances are you're going to have a problem. And we see it a lot in some of the older newspaper, and not that there's a lot of newspapers being published anymore, but there's still some, and we see some of that there
Yeah,
specifically.
and it's not always the version of the RIP. It can
Right.
also be the setting, because I've seen a lot of like modern RIPs, like APPE, for example, RIPs, but where the checkbox use CPSI, which is the old way of rendering PDF going through PostScript, is just checked, which means that they're not using all of the features that they have in their RIP, even though it's a modern one, because it's just wrongly set up. And that can also happen. That one is actually, this is about device N. So in that case, we have duotone images. So normally you should see also that green tick. So here it's a combination of duotone. So that's really an image that has been using like black and one specific separation. This is what you have. As you can see at the bottom, for example, in the gradient, you have those crosses, which means that there is an issue here on that combination of that gradient going from one spot color to another one, which is here Pantone 265 to GWG green. Yeah, so here same, that's one of the patches where we could then use the X, and we have the expected result, which is an image. So here it's again the things of the font substitution and supporting all of Unicode stuff. And what you have here is different kind of font type that you're dealing with. So where you have like a type 1 PostScript and TrueType and the CID fonts and type 3, etc. And then again, here when you output that patch, if you have some characters that are incorrect between top and bottom, that means that there is an issue in rendering and interpreting the fonts.
And this is PDFX4, and this is really where you can begin to see a lot more of the problems that we see every day. In the patches that we looked at before, they were basic patches, not to say that there aren't still problems, and we know there are. As I said, fonts and things like that are still an issue. But once you start to get into things like transparency blending modes, ICC based RGB, etc., now you're starting to see, and these are modern workflows. These are, PDFX4 is really what we would recommend you be using in any case. And all of our new specifications are based on PDFX4, and for a number of reasons. First of all, because you want to be able to take advantage of the features and functions of the newer equipment that exists out there, especially the digital equipment. We people think about CMYK, and it didn't come down for CMYK didn't come down from the heavens, as Dove used to say. But CMYK is not really just CMYK. It's not the same. You can have a different device. If it's an offset device, there are standards for CMYK colorants, ISO 2647. That's it. So all of the CMYK, depending on which ink manufacturer, not even depending on which ink manufacturer, the cyan colorant should be the same. There should be some standardization. Once you get into digital presses, whether they be toner EP based or inkjet based, all bets are off. And they can all be different, which is one of the reasons why PDFX4 and ICC based workflows make a lot more sense, because they can be adapted much easily to the presses and the ink sets that are existing on those presses. I mean, you think about sign and display, right? You've got display work where you've got presses, where you have printers that are printing 12 different colors. So, they have to be translated at the device itself, but to get the most out of them, you really need to move away from just straight CMYK. And that's really where PDFX4 came in. I'm going to let you jump in a little bit, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. I second what you were just saying. Here, when you have like a color managed workflow, you also get those funky blend modes because, like designers, they don't like overprint anymore. They do prefer transparency, and transparency wasn't enough, being transparent. So they use all of the modes that you can find. You can recognize the names that you have here, that you can see in Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and stuff, where you can have different ways of using the transparency, like multiplying and lighten and having like overlays and stuff. And these are may be quite difficult to render. When I do the testing at clients on those patches, most of the times where the workflow is failing, is on those patches, specifically those patches, the blend modes, ICC based RGB, because that's probably the most difficult to honor, I guess.
So device N trapping. So now we're starting to think about what's going on here. We're adding more complexity to the objects because we can, because Illustrator allows for it, and all these applications now allow for it. So as you add more complexity to it, different things can potentially happen. So for example, on the left-hand side, you can notice that there is some trapping between the blends inside the fonts versus the blends inside the background. Which again, you start looking at the level of complexity in these things, and you need to be this is not something you want to see when it's printed. This is something you want to identify in setups before you even get it into the or onto the press. And you can begin to see how this test in particular begins to help in specific areas and specific cases. All right, so this is just a sampling of the tests, and again, if you go to the GWG site website, the tests are available, and they're available as individual patches, which you could use, or we've also created kind of aggregated pages of tests, and we did that because in some cases the if people were starting to use those individual patches and build their own pages, and the patches were conflicting with each other. So if you're going to do it the way we the way we laid it out. What's important? First of all, it comes with documentation. Read the documentation. It's good because it gives you a background as to what the issues are and what the issues are that are being tested. They're not necessarily spec compliant, which means that don't go ahead and pre-flight the tests.
Going to be funny.
Because the chances are they're going to fail, because we've created these tests to solve these issues and identify these issues. The specs themselves, or the GWG specifications, the profiles, etc., are there to help identify and fix problems on regular files, not these. Okay, so use these only to test RIPs and workflows. In terms of checking spec compliancy, we have other tests for that also available on the GWG site. And as I said, right now we're at version 5 of the Ghent Output Suite, and we'll probably be looking to update that in the future. with that, that's what we have. And let me see, do we have?
One question, which is more like a statement. His opinion is that at least in Spain, there's a little awareness regarding PDFs intended for high quality printing, and perhaps organizations like GWG should further promote their work to major publishing houses. I don't know what exactly we is meant here about high quality printing. Is it like modern workflows? Because I think that's probably most of the time the issue that we have with publishing houses, where we have still a lot of them that are still relying on old standards like PDF X1A, which is completely outdated for us. And you, by the way, can find also good literature on the Ghent workgroup, where you have explanation on why you have to update to PDFX4. And I also had the pleasure to host a webinar with David van Driessen, where we also explained that about PDFX4. So I think that really the goal is to move to PDFX4, which is more modern, can handle a lot of things that you cannot with PDFX1A. And I think this is a lot of the things where we have to put the focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. Chris, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. You take a look at a lot of the presses that are available today, and whether it's an extended CMYK or it's, 5 color or 12 color or 8 color or whatever, which really allow you to get the full breadth, but to reach what's available on that press. You
Yeah.
really need to go to a PDFX4 workflow, and we have all that information. It's available on the Ghent Workgroup site. Paul, in terms of PDFX6 and PDF 2.0, first of all, yes, are we working on it behind the scenes for tests, etc.? Yes. Are we going to release it? At this point, there are no producing applications. Adobe, none of the Adobe applications, Quark applications, etc., actually produce PDFX6 or PDF 2.0. Yes, they're standards. Yes, they exist. But if there's no way to create the file, there's no reason for us to confuse the marketplace any more than it is. We want to get people off of PDFX1A to PDFX4 so that they can get kind of maximize what they can do today, and the incremental differences in PDFX6 and PDFX and PDF 2.0. Some of those are a little bit more difficult. We don't want to make a big splash at this point. Don't think it's really the time for it.
So, question from Lannan saying what are your suggestions on handling complex blends and meshes from Illustrator to reduce the million points of vectors that these tools allows and the stepped objects that are created when blends are expanded? They make a very complex file to handle in PDF editor like PacZ.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we're very much aware of the fact that a lot, as especially with these blends, the amount of points that are added on the vectors are crazy. Yeah, you can try and go back and educate the designers, but it's a fool's errand. It ain't going to happen. So the best thing you can do is work with, again, some of the tools that exist out there to help reduce the complexity of that. And some of those are in the pre-flight tools, like as I said, like Pitstop, like
PDF toolbox.
Alice's a PDF toolbox. There are actually some other tools that are existing now that are that have designed ways to reduce the complexity of those. I know that Ultimate does some of it through their imposition software they have, and they've done it specifically to make it so that it can process. Because you think about it, you've got these stepped objects with all these blends, and then you go ahead and you step that across an imposition where you've just added insult to injury, basically. And they tried to devise ways to be able to streamline and minimize that. And right now, that's the best thing that I can suggest that you can do. gwg.org. There's great information there. There really is. There is something called the Ghent PDFX workflow. It's a white paper. It's about to go through a revision, but everything that's in there is accurate. We just want to make it a little bit easier to deal with. There is also some great information We've been working with universities and actually even high schools to teach them so that as they come into the workforce, they already have a good base of knowledge and understanding. And there's a lot of kind of peer-to-peer developed workflow discussions and videos. And so get to the Ghent Work Group website.
Something that I'd like to mention, Dave, also on the Ghent Work Group, and this is completely linked to what we showed here with the Ghent Suite. We have the conformance program as well. It's a way for you to get the confirmation that you're compliant to the Ghent Work Group. So the idea is like using the Ghent Suite that we have here that you run through your workflow and RIP. And then once it has been done, then you send that back to us where we do the examination of what you sent. And if everything is okay, then you get a conformance label for 2 years that you can use also for marketing purposes and also to prove to your clients that you're able to handle those things, that you are compliant or you conform to the Ghent Work Group. And you have, in that case, what I was mentioning earlier in the presentation, you have the level 1 and the level 1+2, which is also taking care of the ICC column manage workflows. I really encourage you to go to the website and you have the information about the program and you can download the suite and try that out. And then you'll be, published on the Ghent website. So when people are going there, they see the list of the companies that are conforming to the Ghent work group. And you can use that again as, being a proof that you're doing the things right.
We can give you a little something. There's a little badge you can put on your website. And if you need help, so even if you've done it and you can't figure out why you're having these issues, there are resources available that you can bring in. There are different companies that'll be willing to
Yeah. And the
or
list is
available
also
to.
on the website, on the conference program. You have the list of the companies that are Ghent Workgroup members and that can help you to achieve the result.
So with that, Christian, thank you so much. To
Thank
the
you.
people who are here, thank you all for attending. And with that, all the best to all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.